era of football as it relates to the JFF, Jamaica Football Federation. But to do the official welcome and the roll call of club, I'm going to call on President Designate Jr. to do so.
Thank you, President Paul. Good evening to all our Kiwanians and guests tonight who are on with us. Special tonight, we'll be talking football with Ambassador Stewart Stephenson. Welcome, Ambassador. I know that you're online with us. My job tonight is to give you all a chance to bring greetings tonight. And I'll start therefore with those clubs from overseas. Are there any clubs overseas that would like to bring greetings at this time? If not, could we go to Division 25? Clubs from Division 25 that would like to bring greetings at this time. Division 25. If not, we'll move to Division 24. Division 24. Clubs from Division 24 that would like to bring greetings tonight. None? Then we'll move to Division 23 and we'll start with West. Division 23 West.
Good evening, PE Junior.
Good
PE
evening,
Junior.
sir.
Good evening, everyone. This is Secretary Treasurer Wayne, bringing greetings on behalf of President Omilo and the team of diverse professionals, opines. I'm looking forward to this interesting topic.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for coming. Division 23 West. Division 23 East. Would you like to bring greetings at this time? Yes, I heard.
I'm Director Simone, Kiwanis Club of Papina UTEC. I'm alone at the moment, but my president and others will join shortly.
Thank you for coming and we await their presence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Division 23 East.
All right, good night, everyone. President Gavin, Kiwanis Club of Ligani.
Yes.
Joined with, of course, the guest speaker tonight, PVP Stewart Stephenson. I also have with me past President Dave Michael and distinguished President Michael Williams as well. Thanks for having us at the meeting tonight. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming.
And more members to join as well.
Okay.
Good evening. This is Chairman Judith Henry from the Kiwanis Club of New Kingston.
Yes.
I wish you a good meeting, and I guess I'll learn some stuff about football this evening. And we have 3 persons and hoping that we will get some more.
Thank you for coming, Judith. Any other Division 23 East? If not, we go to our own Division 23 Central, that is. Division 23 Central. Division 23 Central.
Hi, good evening,
Yes.
PE.
Junior. Not hearing you anymore.
Oh, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
PED really said, bringing you greetings from 23 Central, Surrey online.
Okay.
Yes, and at the moment I can see only LGED Desmond and myself from 23 Central.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure others will join soon. But I'm excited to learn about football.
Yes, you sure will.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming as usual.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Any others from Division 23 Central? If not, we'll move to our SLPs. Come, let me get the greetings from our SLPs now. Any online that would like to bring greetings? If not, we will move to, are there any non-Kiwanians online that would like to bring greetings at this point? Are there anybody else online that would like to bring greetings?
Non-Kiwanian member from Washington, D.C. area, joining to listen to Mr. Stephenson talk about football.
Oh, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Good. Any other? If not, we just bring special welcome to Ambassador Stewart, and we're looking forward to hear from you. And without any further ado, I'll pass you back to our President, Paul.
Yes, thank you very much, President-designate Junior.
Yes.
Apologies for absence. I didn't receive any apologies from any of our members. DLG Willie, did you get any apologies at this time?
Yes, President Paul. I got another apology for absence from Treasurer Ovid. In fact, he's undergoing an eye operation on Thursday morning. So he'll be out for a week.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us continue. Let us keep Treasurer Ovid in our prayers and wish for him a successful surgery. We'll move on to the recognition of birthdays and anniversaries. I'm going to invite anyone on this call. If you're celebrating any birthday or any special occasion, I invite you to share with us. Anyone? Well, if not, we'll move on to our Kiwanis education segment, and I'm going to call on LGED Desmond to lead us in that segment.
Thank you, President Paul. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
We are.
Okay, thank you. My topic is protocol for the official agenda. For a proposed agenda to become the official agenda for a meeting, it must be adopted by the Assembly at the outset of the meeting. At the time that an agenda is presented for adoption, it is in order for any member to move to amend the proposed agenda by adding any item which the member desires to add, or by proposing any other change. It is wrong to assume, as many do, that the president sets the agenda. It is common for the president to prepare a proposed agenda, but that becomes binding only if it is adopted by the full assembly. Thank you, President. That is it for Kiwanis education.
Thank you very much, LGED. Desmond?
So we have to do that every week?
We'll talk about that afterwards. Past district trustee.
As we get ready to hear our guest speaker, I'm going to call on DP Marcel to do the introduction. DP Marcel.
Thank you, President. You're hearing me, I take it?
Yes, we are.
Great. Yeah, it is a pleasure for me to do this introduction of our very special guest speaker this evening. Ambassador A.B. Stewart Stephenson, an attorney at law, was admitted to the bar at the Supreme Court, Kingston, in October 1979. A graduate of Kingston College, University of the West Indies with first degree in management studies and law, and the Norman Manley Law School. He enjoys the distinction of having managed seven state and non-governmental entities during his profound career, covering the areas of law, sports administration, financial regulation, competition policy, international trade, diplomacy, and property management. Having served as the first executive director of Jamaica's Financial Services Commission from June 1994 to May 1997, Ambassador Stephenson later served as executive director of the Fair Trading Commission from June 1990 to December 2000. He joined the Foreign Service in January 2001 and served first as Jamaica's Consul General in Toronto, Canada, from January 2001 to April 2002, and thereafter Jamaica's ambassador to the Republic of Cuba from May 2002 to April 2004. On his return to Jamaica, he resumed his private law practice until September 2006 when he joined the state-owned Practice Corporation of Jamaica as managing director. On October 1, 2009, he assumed the post of the tutor at the Norman Manley Law School Legal Aid Clinic and served as acting director for 1 year, from October 1 to 2013. Ambassador Stephenson completed his tenure at the Legal Aid Clinic after serving 7 years on April 30, 2016. He then formed the law firm of Kingston Stephenson Company on June 16, 2016, where he is as a senior counsel. Ambassador Stephenson served on many governmental Jamaica boards, including Jamaica Citizens Bank, Jamaica Bauxite Mining, Companies Office of Jamaica, Postal Corporation of Jamaica, JAMPRO, Jamaica International Free Zone Development Company, Airports Authority of Jamaica, and the Port Authority. During the period 1975 to 1983, Ambassador Stephenson worked in the civil service, serving as administrative officer in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Development, clerk of courts for the parishes of Kingston, St. Andrews, and St. Catherine, and Crown Counsel in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. During the period 1975 to 1983, Ambassador Stephenson between 1983 and 1987, Ambassador Stephenson established a private practice with the late W.B. Frankson QC on Duke Street in Kingston, before becoming managing partner in the law firm of Stevenson, Hemming, and Green in 1988. At his private practice, Ambassador Stephenson served as a judge advocate for the Jamaica Defense Force Court Martial Tribunal and an assessor in total advocacy at Norman Manley Law School. He also lectured on the role of the Securities Commission, Securities Law Enforcement at the Jamaica Institute of Management. Continued as an associate student at the law school in evidence and criminal practice and procedure. Ambassador Stephenson was a member of Jamaica's delegation at CARICOM Intergovernmental Task Force meetings on amendments to protocols of the Treaty of Chaguaramas and CARICOM's alternate on the Free Trade Era of America, negotiating group on competition policy from 1999 to the year 2000. As a CARICOM consultant, he assisted the Secretariat in March 2004 in establishing a competition commission for the region governing competition law and policy and consumer protection. He was subsequently appointed and served as the only Jamaican government commissioner at the CARICOM Competition Commission, based in Suriname from 2008 to 2015. An active member of the St. Andrew Justices of the Peace Association of Jamaica, Ambassador Stephenson was commissioned as a Justice of the Peace on November 30, 2011, and given a special award for outstanding contribution to the association and the courts in 2019. While at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Ambassador Stephenson served on the Guild Council at the Hall Chairman, Sub-Warden for Taylor Hall. He represented both the Mona and Caville campuses in football, cricket, and hockey. Ambassador Stephenson, an accomplished footballer, has been a sports administrator for over 42 years. Having been elected Assistant Secretary of League and United Football Club in '75, he's a former board member of the JFF and former president of CASAFA, Kingston Central Football Association, and completed his third term as president in January 2017, serving for president a total of 11 years. He was a member of Jamaica's 1977 World Cup football squad and also an analyst for TVJ's World Cup 1998, CVM's World Cup 2006 and 2014, and Class Sports Radio, World Cup 2010 football coverage. He is a founding member of Advocates Association of Jamaica and a member of the Jamaica Bar Association. He's a member of the Kiwanis Club of Ligani. He missed twice over Kingston. Kingston Cricket is a member of the Kingston Cricket Club and Real Mona Football Club. Ambassador Stephenson is married to Dawn, and they are the proud parents of 3 sons. He enjoys listening to music, playing dominoes, and discussing public and world affairs. Fellow Kiwanians, ladies and gentlemen, guests, believe it or not, what I just covered was for one person. When I went through it, so that if I thought about 2 different or 3 different persons, but such is the nature of our special guest this evening. And it is indeed a pleasure for me, personal friend of mine, to introduce and welcome. Known in some circles as Stewie. In earlier days, some of us called him National Stew. And from what you heard just now, you can understand why. Help me to welcome our special guest this evening, Ambassador Stewart Stephenson.
Introduction longer than the presentation.
Might need an extension.
Yes, am I there? Good evening, President Paul.
Yes, good evening, Ambassador.
And members of the distinguished Kiwanis Club of Kingston. It's a pleasure for me to be here again. The last time I visited with the club was at your fine facility at the National Chest Hospital, where I was fascinated by the way in which the club was organized. All the pictures of your past presidents were there, the ready history at your fingertips. And I said, boy, I really hope that my own club, Ligani, would one day be able to be elevated to that kind of facility. But I have a lot of friends in the Kiwanis Club of Kingston, because I remember DP Earl invited me as a guest speaker while I was at Fair Trading. Then you were doing your luncheon meetings at, I think it was the Hilton Hotel. That's as far back as I'm going with the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. And then, of course, I have some very close friends with distinguished President Junior. DP Stewart, I want to thank him, and DP Marcel for inviting me. And of course, the distinguished of the distinguished, Stan Donwell, Willie Reason, and of course, distinguished trustee Ralston Nunes. So I know I'm in very esteemed company. But can I just, before I start, give a special thank you to my own President Gavin, who is here with his team, so we could make an interclub this evening as well from the Kiwanis Club of Ligani. The DP Michael is there, past President Gavin, Dave Michael, and of course, DLG Bobby Winter is here with us as well. So I'm comforted by the support of my own club. President Paul and members, you know, when DP Stewart spoke to me about the JFF thing, I have been doing very selective presentations, and I think the last time I spoke was, or gave an interview, it was published in the Observer nearly 2 weeks ago, And I was, of course, surprised to see I got the whole back page of cascade of failures. But, you know, sometimes once you have served, there is a level of respect and I suppose admiration that emanates even from the media. And I have to acknowledge that. But tonight's topic, as I said, when VP Stewart and I looked at this subject matter, is the resignation of the General Secretary the solution to what ails the Jamaica Football Federation? Was a question which was really an entree into looking at the current administration and what has been its performance or lack of performance over the last 5 years since 2017 when Mike Ricketts was elected as president. And the ready answer is that given the present scenario, the General Secretary's resignation in itself would be merely one of the solutions to the problems that ail the JFF and had beset the current administration. The answer is therefore, is the resignation the solution? It is merely one of the solutions because the JFF has been hamstrung by many, many problems. Now, as we are all aware, the members of the current national men's team, the Reggae Boys, had called for the General Secretary's resignation following a loss of confidence and trust in his office by the players. And that we found out in a letter which they published after the debacle in Suriname when the team had played to a 1-1 draw there in Suriname, Paramaribo, and could not get back home in time to get proper practice for their game, which followed on Tuesday in the National Stadium. That was a bit of an embarrassment again. And the players were obviously frustrated by the fact that they could not get out of Suriname because the flight, a link between Suriname, Paramaribo, and Port of Spain was canceled. And so they had to hastily arrange a charter back to Kingston because, as we know, they were playing their game against Mexico back home here on Tuesday. I'm sorry, yes, against Mexico. And then Suriname was the return game. They had a return game against Suriname here in the stadium and followed by the game against Mexico. I was watching TV. I'd been interviewed on Talking Sports with Orville Higgins after the game. And we were looking at this question of the flight arrangements because the tour operator or travel agent for the federation sought to give an example that, boy, they had booked the flight and thing, but it had been canceled. And then we all saw Suriname fly in even before our team got back to Jamaica. And the simple question which would have been asked is, why would you have booked a normal commercial travel between Kingston and Suriname and then Suriname back to Trinidad? Because the very thing that happened, which was the cancellation of the flight by Suriname Airways, wouldn't be a surprise. As most of us know, when you travel commercially, and depending on the time of the season and all that, airlines will cancel. So what you typically do with a football team is you go charter to charter. You charter a flight down to Suriname and you charter a flight back out. That way you avoid the exigencies of normal commercial travel where flights can be delayed or canceled because of the short window that you will have to get the return match the following Tuesday in Kingston at the stadium. The better course, and what I thought would have been the customary operation, which was done at least during the days when Burrell was here, is that you would charter your flight once you have a short turnaround for a return match. So that obviously upset the players, and they then, and we're getting all reports now out of the team, that they called for the resignation of the General Secretary because obviously they said in their letter that many promises apparently were broken and the trust in him had fallen. And so they called for his resignation. Interestingly, the president gave an interview, which we heard, recorded, when the players asked him, are we going to have resignation of the secretary? And he said, yes. Well, I can tell you that as far as we are concerned up to right now, I don't know that the secretary has resigned. And other discussions have followed that it seems that maybe there's an attempt being made to terminate his contract. And that is why in my article on June 10th, as I said 2 weeks ago, I asked, but if he resigned, he would have no legal recourse to any benefits apart from his leave and so. But if you have to fine, there has to be a term in the contract to terminate him. And most contracts for employment would have an exit clause for cause. Some just says on the notice, 30 days notice or whatever. But the GFF, I'm sure, would have had in that contract, which I have not seen, an exit clause. And so it's a bit surprising that mere 2 weeks later, the General Secretary still has not resigned, nor has the GFF fired him. And the little words that you may hear through the grapevine, which you can't rely on, of course, are that terms are being discussed. Well, I would find that shocking, because what the General Secretary is asked to resign for is because of incompetence. And you don't negotiate terms if somebody is being, his contract or service is being terminated for incompetence. There's nothing to negotiate. But I just want to move on to say that this call for the General Secretary's resignation by the Reggae Boys had been made from way back in February this year, because there was an article in the lead article in the Gleaner, GFF grossly incompetent. This is from February this year. And the Gleaner, in its editorial, cited 2 instances where appeals and protests had been lodged by the GFF, through obviously the General Secretary, about the use of Costa Rica of a player who had tested positive in their February 2 World Cup match. That had been protested by Jamaica. And also, prior to that, in November last year, in the World Cup qualifiers against US, an objection or protest had been lodged about whether a player had in fact been infringed or for first half handball in the penalty area. So those are 2 complaints which have been made by the GFF. And the Gleaner took the Federation to task because they said that both protests or appeals were dismissed. Why? Because the GFF had not followed the protocol. In one case, according to the FIFA, the GFF protests and requests for review should have been accompanied by a payment of 1,000 Swiss francs. The GFF did not lodge a fee. The GFF should have notified the match commission of the protest. The GFF failed at that. The GFF failed to provide a copy of the original protest to the match commissioner. Evidence that such a protest had been submitted within 2 hours of the match. Now, this is a publicly recorded in the Gleaner in an editorial called GFF Grossly Incompetent. And in that article, they went on to suggest that the evidence suggests that this report were in the hands of the GFF bosses for more than 2 months. And it was perhaps buried deep among the mishaps, missteps, and incompetencies that characterize the management of Jamaica's football. In other words, that failure to follow simple procedures to lodge a complaint with is a metaphor of Jamaica's football and symptomatic of a federation that has lurched from crisis to crisis, mainly of its own meaning. So this question of competence of the GFF leadership and its General Secretary, as I say, had been raised even in the Gleaner from far back, from in February earlier this year. In an article, of course, that was written also in February this year, entitled Jamaica Just Ready to Quit. Former President Tony James, former coach Ali McNabb, and myself had raised the issue of the question of competence in the administration of the affairs of the Federation, and suggested that based on the many crises and failures we have, then the president and his general secretary should go. Now we have found that the players have called for his resignation, which, as I said, up to now has not happened. Now, in raising these issues, the question, of course, is that the players have, when you get to the question, people have suggested, but then, Ambassador, why should players be calling on the general secretary to resign? My point is, when you get to that stage, then you're really been in a bad way, because players would not normally be countenancing calling on the resignation of the president and general secretary. But quite obviously, the players have had interaction with the general secretary, and in their letter seem to suggest that, which was published publicly, that they had lost confidence in him. And this is important because if the players cannot trust or relate to the general secretary, and why general secretary? He's really the chief operating officer of the JFF. And he interfaces along with the manager of the team, of course, with the club, with the players. He would have to look at the contracts and all that. And clearly there's a breakdown there. So I agree that clearly you would not want the players to be calling on resignation of president and general secretary. But the fact is, when you get to those kind of situations, you're at rock bottom. And we have seen examples in the World Cup with Cameroon in days gone by, of course, where players have not been paid, promises of per diem or whatever have not been paid, and World Cup teams have suffered from that similarly. Now, let me therefore suggest that if the president, the general secretary is to go, I don't think that the president can divorce himself from the failings of the general secretary, because he was one of his close associates in the campaign for president back in 2017, being the president of the Manchester FA, and was handpicked by the president for the post of general secretary. Well, general secretary is appointed by the board, but on the recommendation of the president, and every president handpicks his general secretary. So how can you then divorce yourself from an employee in whom you have displayed full confidence over the last 5 years since your election as president in 2017? The truth is, if the general secretary has been incompetent, then so is the president. And in my view, both should really depart together. But as I said, the resignation general secretary is just one solution to the problems of the federation. In my view, the federation was doomed from the beginning because it embarked on running a federation, which is now an international organization, without a plan for development of the game. My cricket's president never presented a manifesto in running for the office in 2017. And well, coincidentally ran against me, and we had our manifesto. And as far as the public is concerned, if there is no vision or plan for the short-term, medium-term, or long-term development of the sport, this should have been shared with the public. It is folly to argue that you have a plan which is confidential, if there is a plan, because it is the public on whom you will rely on to support the plans of the federation and programs, either through the private sector in sponsorship or the general public through their purchase of tickets to watch the national games or the national teams, or to buy memorabilia from the federation to fund its activities. In a nutshell, the general public is always a vital 12th man to support your team while on the field, and you must gain confidence, must gain their confidence outlining the plan for your plan for development of the game. So, in my view, you can't have a plan which you don't disclose to the public, because you need public support if you're going to go forward in developing the game. And I say from the beginning, Mike has had no plan. He has shown no plan to the public, and that is why you have a lack of confidence. Now, let us look at the issue now. If you had a plan, one of the major factors that you would have had to consider in your plan for development of the game is how would you fund the game? Right now, my understanding, the only source of funding the federation has is from the FIFA allocations. There is no revenue flowing from private sector sponsorship, no sale of memorabilia, and no other way of attracting public support for getting funds into the organization. So, you know, our last failed World Cup campaign to Qatar never had a private sector sponsor. And the current CONCACAF Nations League don't have a private sector sponsor either. This to me is a major failure of the federation. It hasn't happened before that we are engaged in World Cup campaigns or in Nations Cup or competitions similar, and we have no private sector support. And of course, with the COVID issue, which have affected us, you're not able to get 35,000 people into the stadium. And so you're not going to come out with a substantial surplus from any of these games. In fact, most of these games that you're going to run with the stadium and the cost for the stadium going to run the federation at a loss. And the truth is, without private sector support, most of the programs funded by the JFF will not get off the ground. The government has done its part and should be applauded for its efforts in funding the activities of the JFF through its annual contributions through the Sports Development Foundation. But these funds from SDF go primarily to underwriting the federation's administrative costs. But if the JFF had produced a private sector plan to partner with them in the traditional manner, we would have had developmental projects sponsored by named sponsors. And there are many throughout the country that we know is a household name with sponsoring JFF football. Nobody is with them in partnership now. So the federation is engaged in many age group international and regional competitions, which are under-resourced simply because there is no funds to support the programs. This I see as a major failing of the federation, which has not sought out and reached a hand to the private sector with a comprehensive development plan and a budget which can be supported in providing the opportunity for teams. The people I've heard say, but Ambassador, it's a national program. The private sector should step up. The private sector are not a set of fools. They're not going to be separated from their money just because you're a national program. If you cannot account for the funds and you don't put up a proper budget and a development plan which makes sense and which they can see, you're not going to get the private sector funds. Why? Because the private sector enterprises are all funded by their shareholders. Best they pay their dividends to their shareholders than give away money into a scheme that don't seem to be going anywhere. And that's really what is happening right now. Private sector is not confident that the JFF can put on a successful show at any time, or that their hard-earned dollars, if it's given to the JFF, are going to yield results in long-term development of the game in the country. And that is something which somebody has to win back the respect and support of the private sector before the game is going to get funds. Don't believe that the private sector are going to take their funds and give to any organization unless it is confident that it can get its dollar value out of its sponsorship and that its funds are not going into any other avenue apart from the development of the game. Because there are many rumors about what happens to money is going into the JFF, but those are all rumors and I don't want to pursue that line of argument. Another failure of the federation is what is the current state of its debts? Everybody who's going to want to put the money in our association wants to know what's about the debts. Well, I can recall when I was a member of the board up to 2017, that the federation had about 230 million in debt. So who knows what is the current state of the financial position of the federation? All we hear is that they are broke, they have no funds, which is not surprising because of the failures, one after the other. And have the finances of the federation recently been audited? And if so, has it been shared with the public? And, you know, while I was on the board of the JFF, there was this reluctance to share the finances with the public. But the public is what is supporting the federation. It's a public body. It's not a secret. And if you manage your affairs competently, my resume, when I see Marcel, I must tell you, you read maybe a little too much about me, but I'm humbled by whatever you have said. But my history shows you also that I have headed many state organizations, and in each one of them, it is not kept as a secret, the finances of the organization. Audited finances are published to the public because you are seeking to get the public support for what you're doing. If you show your finances in secret, you'll never get a cent from the private sector. Another area of concern for me is the question of the Articles of Association of the Federation regarding the provisions for governance. We hear that the FIFA has sent statutes down, but before we even got to FIFA, we had a constitution for the JFF, which was amended in February 2015. And as we are all aware, the current situation of the statutes or the Articles of Association, which is what governs the JFF right now, is that it's the 13 parish presidents who have the vote elected for elected officials. 13 parish presidents, one of whom is the President of CASAFA, who governs 2 parishes and yet has been deliberately given only 1 vote to match St. Mary, St. Anne, St. Thomas, all of those, and CASAFA, of course, as we knew, runs the largest football competitions in the country. But the fact of the matter is, does the public today have confidence in the ability of merely 13 men to select the elected officers for the Federation? That issue is one of governance because everybody must have oversight. So I go on to say then that the public has no confidence in a body in which merely 13 parish presidents have the right to elect the officers, when there is such a broad cross-section of footballing entities which contribute to the development of the sport, from the grassroots to the national level. And that change took place in February, as I said, 2015. Before that, the JFF constitution, which were converted to article, had 105 electors. And in that constitution before, each parish had 5 votes. Then there were confed chairmen who had votes. There was participation from ISA, from coaches, associations, and those contributed to the 105 votes. In there, of course, was the fact that the existing elected officers had votes. That had to be changed at some stage. But to change it from a situation where the 7 elected officers each had a vote, where you had 105 electors, if you took out those elected officers who would have been in conflict in voting for themselves. In CASAFA, for example, I can just use an example. In CASAFA, once a Congress is called, the elected officers stand aside, they go back to their clubs, and only the clubs vote. Elected persons don't have a vote. The previous JFF constitution had elected officers having the right to vote. That obviously had to be changed. But to transform it to a body from 105, you would have then removed maybe 10 elected persons, including the conference chairman and the elected officers, 7 and 3, 10, which were then the 10 people. You would have gone down to 90 odd people. The JFF in 2013 at a Congress that I attended, unhappily, in Lucy in 2015, on Mother's Day, voted to remove from 105 electors to 13, being the 13 parish presidents, and giving CASAFA, who then had 10 votes and each parish had 5, 1 single vote. And we in CASAFA voted against that change. And beyond that, it was so scandalous because the amendment of the Constitution was riddled with errors. But the present leadership at that time, God rest his soul, would not listen to reason and move from one situation where there were conflict to one where it was from the sublime to the ridiculous, 13 members. And that is what has happened now. And that is what votes in the elected officers in the JFF presently. Now, here's a question that I pose. So that constitution was amended by the current parish representatives to remove it from 105 to 13. And these same parish presidents and representatives are now going to be asked by FIFA to increase the number back to somewhere like in 80. Isn't that ironic? Those same parish representatives voted themselves down from 105 to 13, and now they are going to be asked to vote themselves back up to 80. Isn't that a tragedy? Well, we still wait on this statutes from FIFA, which is quite a secret. Nobody knows what is happening with this constitution. And I should tell you, I hear that, and this is what we understand, that FIFA, of course, is looking to more transparency, accountability, and governance. And I'm looking in anticipation for what these new statutes may be, but it's shrouded in secrecy. We in the parishes were given a draft of the proposed statutes. We went through it thoroughly in January 2020. Now we're in 2022. By the time our amendments were proposed, we heard that the Federation had already submitted amendments to FIFA. So the parishes really have had no great input into whatever is coming down. But if whatever comes on from FIFA restores the democratic structure of the Federation in its elections, restores and provides oversight for the governance of the game, then clearly that will be welcomed. And because the truth is the previous constitution was much more democratic than what exists now. So what of the current situation? So despite the shambles of our World Cup campaign, which ended in March this year, or lackluster performance to date in the Nations Cup, the 3-1 win over Suriname was heartening. So that offers some encouragement. The controversy surrounding the appointment of coaches on the national women's team, you'll have heard of that as well. That one coach was recently asked to stand down by the players and a new coach appointed. But before that, there was one coach who seems to have had some issues in relation to his previous activities in Canada. The current women's team is engaged in preparations for FIFA World Cup this year. And that is another issue because we hear that the team is unfit. We just read an article about it. The team is currently, I understand, being trained in Colorado in the United States, and funding not provided by the Federation. There is, of course, a benefactor, we understand, in one of the Malis, who has had to come and support the team. And that is another matter because no one person is supposed to be supporting the preparation of a national team because of the obvious influence which that person will have. But that is the reality of a federation that has no funds, right? And so, and the federation's current leadership has shown no inclination to step aside with all the calls that have been made by the various people, including myself, in articles, no inclination to self-examine, to look to see whether you are a failure or not doing well and to step aside. So what's going to happen now is that we have to wait on these statutes, which will then give the new voting structure, and the entities that are eligible to vote. I understand that, for example, National Premier League as a competition which is affiliated to the JFF through a franchise arrangement will have votes. I understand that the parishes, of course, will have their votes because the truth is the development of the game starts at the parish level. And this is why in our structure of football, the parish associations have always played the lead role in the elections of the leadership of the federation. But then this board has to examine itself as well, because if you are going to have been supporting a team that has shown no plan, has sold no plan to the country, has sold no plan to the private sector, aren't you going to accept some responsibility for where we are right now? So there are compelling issues for immediate reform within the federation. For example, and I mentioned just a few, the national team presently travels with any national team that travels carries a head of delegation, which is appointed when the president does not travel. Typically, the president represents his federation. When he's not with the national team, a head of delegation will be sent with the team. In the event that there needs to be dialogue between national associations, the head of delegation would hold that discussion. But what we have found is the president is on the trip with the national team, vice presidents are on the trip with the president, and yet still the head of delegation is appointed with a deputy to boot. Both of whom would have nothing to do with the president is there to represent himself. And what happens, of course, is that these heads of delegations and deputy would be given first class travel or business travel. Per diem allowances, which by the way was increased when this president took over office. So the head of delegation gets more per diem. A deputy is appointed, which gets increased per diem. And so federation that is strapped for cash has increased its per diem allowances with the Jamaican dollar catapulting up from 120 right away to 150 now. And so you see why we are in a problem. The second issue for me is the question of this second-tier football league, which has been boycotted by CASAFA. The second-tier football league at a national level has proved to be a failure and a disaster time and time again. Coming back from when Reno was relegated from the Premier League in the 80s. Nobody wants to watch a second-tier league and to travel all over the island to watch it. What existed before, what worked, and what is recommended is that we return to the confederations, where the confederations, the top clubs in the federations, in the confederations, play within themselves, and the winner is promoted to the JFF or plays off for promotion to the Premier League. So, for example, the Confed leagues that we had were CASAFA, Eastern Confed, South Central Confed, and Western Confed. And what would happen is the Premier League, which of course is supported, you get into the Premier League, which has 12 teams, by 2 coming down and 2 going up. And typically, the 4 Confed teams would play off and the top 2 go up. There was a concern that some of the parishes are not going up. Well, there is an issue. If there's an issue with development in the parish, well, deal with the issue of development in the parish. Don't stifle the other parishes like CASAFA that is producing high-quality football teams and tell them that they have to play off. And then when they play off, there is a concern about them dominating the Premier League. Right now, I think they have 6 teams. We typically have 7 out of 12. But it is going to cost the second-tier administration too much money to have these teams traveling around, playing from Port Antonio to Hanover with a second-tier team when nobody's going to watch it. This league has no sponsorship as well. Right now, it's being played without sponsors. And the teams are going to be put to tremendous expense, or the federation, if they are going to underwrite the costs, to run a national second division competition, which is not supported. And so this is something which, in my judgment, and I recommend, should be sent back to the confederations where it was enjoying its preeminence and providing the 2 qualifiers for the Premier League. And if there is a decision that you want to increase the Premier League, maybe to 14 teams, and you need the 4 Confed winners to go up, then so be it. If the 4 Confed winners would go up, 4 would come down and rejoin their confederations, and you would cut. The confederation leagues are very nicely supported. And so what we would have is, instead of this insistence in believing that by trying the same thing over and getting the same results, you're going to get success. It never happens. The A League, which was run, our second-tier league, which has been run nationally, has failed each time. It's going to fail again for lack of public support and sponsorship. And I think the return to common sense and use the Confed structure, which we had before, and promote either the 4 winners of the Confeds or the playoff again for the 2 top teams, should be supported. The other thing that for me is a concern is what is happening with the development of our local coaches and the referees. No plan has been disclosed for how we are going to enhance the development of local coaches to attain international competence through partnership with other clubs internationally, facilitated by national associations. I believe this is an area that has been sorely lacking. The last time I knew it was Wendell Downswell, which got a trip abroad. I think if it was Calvin, we spent a time understudying one of the coaches internationally. This is something that should be looking at. But you have no plan. And so a plan would have included addressing the enhancement and development of your local coaches, who are the ones bringing the players from 8, 6, 7, 8, right? Why is there no incentive to find a scheme to get the top local coaches being associated with your Tottenham, your AC Milan? President Paul, you had muted me?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You're still on.
Yeah, on again.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, we're hearing you.
Would have also had the support and the commitment of Overseas Examination Board in this respect.
I'm back on, President Paul?
Yes, your ambassador. Go ahead.
I don't have much longer to go. I'm just going on. So my thing is that the Federation should have a plan to develop local clubs internationally so that we can enhance the quality of our stock and build the competence of the people who have to handle our players locally going forward. There, of course, are the local referees. They have been making a little headway, but I believe we should be looking at a minimum number of local referees who should be getting to FIFA qualifications. What is the plan for that? Is there a plan? We don't know. But it seems to me that these are two vital elements of the game that the Federation should be seeking to enhance. And then finally, on what could be done, I think, to improve, what about local facilities? Not one discussion about new football fields around the country. There was a plan and a hope for centralized stadium. We have the National Stadium in Kingston. There's one in Mobile. Is something being done in Mandeville, central area, or St. Elizabeth? What about St. Mary? No discussion about the enhancement of local football facilities. In other words, fellow Kiwanians and friends, the truth is that the game of football permeates many aspects of development. It's not just player, it's also administration, it's coaches, it's referees, and it's the football facilities itself on which the game is played. We have not heard one thing about enhancement, if there is a plan for developing local fields, and how do we get that done? So I wanted to just mention, as I said, this thing of the FIFA statutes that we're waiting on, because they are going to now signal and go into the question of election of officers. The current JFF constitution or articles provides the one that was reduced in 2015 at that fiasco of a meeting in Hanover to reduce the voting to 13. We had a treasurer before, and then of course the general secretary, but that general secretary post was made a paid post and is appointed by contract by the board. But what is a new line of officers going to be under the statutes coming from FIFA? Right now we have president and 3 vice presidents. That is all elected posts in the JFF right now. They are accompanied by the 13 parish presidents and 2 nominated members, and the board of the JFF comprises 19 people, which is bigger than the Congress of 13 parish presidents. Can you believe that? A further anomaly. So what's the new regulations going to provide? Are there going to be more room for elected officers? Because one of the 3 vice presidents currently serve as a treasurer. Wasn't happy about it because I didn't think that the provisions in the articles specifically spoke to the role of who manages the purse strings within the federation and how do we account for it. I hope that FIFA looks at that and appoints a treasurer and persons with competence to fill that position. Right now, there therefore is elected officers in place. who don't seem to be going anywhere despite the calls around by everybody. The next set of elections will be in 2023. And we wait, of course, to see now what is going to be, who are going to be the persons assigned. As I said, I hear that the Parish Premier League will have a number of votes. Parishes will have votes as well, women's association, coaches, etc. We are still in uncertain mode here. And as soon as those come out, we'll know where we go. There are a number of people who have been, it seems to me, positioning themselves for a job that is not available. People will suggest, who is going to be president? Well, the president is still in office, so there can be no elections until there is a vacancy. And once you have a vacancy, then you have to look for what is provided in the new statute. So fellow Kiwanians, stand by. This ship is on the rocks, and I think it has a little more battering to go before we see the light of day. Thank you for your patience, and I'll take questions if any.
Yes, there's one question in the chat, Ambassador.
Yes. I see seven comments in the chat. I haven't opened them yet.
Yes, yes. One question is from past President Dave Michael. He asked if you would be in the job, of president of the JFF.
I just answered that by concluding.
I know you did.
Yes. We don't know what the statutes will provide with. And most importantly, Dave Michael, it's not a flippant thing though, because we would have to find out. When I ran in 2017, I had just been off the board and I'd come back to my private life. I'd given up CASAFA presidency as well. I knew what the budget was. I knew what the needs of the federation was at that time. Nobody knows what is the state of play in the federation now. I suspect the debts are enormous. I don't know what the resources in the administration is. What is the talent pool in running the administration? Nobody knows what is going on. So whoever is lining up to run, if you want to think about it, you better do your homework before you think of that job, because you might be going into a situation which destroys even a well-endowed financial person. But we hear that people are already jockeying, so who knows?
Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
DP Stewart?
No, I heard Earl going ahead, so go ahead, Earl.
I was just making one comment, Ambassador.
Yes, my big brother.
And the word that sums it up is a quagmire.
Yes.
Boy.
Unhappy quagmire.
Boy.
And you know, the game is, sometimes I don't even appreciate how influential this game is in terms of the support. I know as president in CASAFA, we have taken the view long ago that football is a vehicle for moving young people off the streets, out of harm's way, but also in attaining educational opportunities like myself and my son, who is a reggae boy, as we all know. He has gone through the game. Joel has gone up, gotten his degree, and many players, and become professionals through the game. Then there is the other group of people who play football for a living. Well, my boy did 10 years as a professional, and well, he did his degree, because those of us who are fathers appreciate the game is a means to an end, not always a end in itself. So you get the boy, through football, a good education, through a scholarship, and then he makes a decision. He played professional football in Europe and in USA for 10 years, but then he had a econ degree and he's now working at a big company, Cisco. And there are others who have taken the professional line from early, your BB gardeners and those and your current national players, and gone into the game full time. I only say to those players who don't have the education and go out to the game, save well, because there's going to be a day when you're out of football or you're injured, and you can't be looking around on all the money that you're wasting. So, you know, there are lessons there in the game. And I must tell you, as a sportsman, the game teaches respect for rules. It teaches the whole question of discipline, preparation for games, match strategy, etc. And most importantly, football is goal-oriented. So like Kiwanians, we all know we're about achieving goals.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes. Yeah, Ambassador. The question the picture you painted at the end almost made it seem, I don't want to say hopeless, but it made, because what you're saying is that for good people to even get involved, you know, there's not even enough transparency for you to know what you're getting involved in.
That's a fact.
So you kind of have to just say, you know, so are you going, is anybody who is worth his salt going to get into something like that? But what I wanted to ask, the FIFA move to do with the governance, is it something unique to Jamaica, or is it all across, they're doing it all over in the world?
No, because in Trinidad, they had an issue down in Trinidad. You'll recall that the Trinidad FA was wound down and taken over by FIFA because they weren't accounting. You see, when FIFA gives, for example, $1 million in a World Cup year to every one of their 204 national, so that's a lot of money. And FIFA, therefore, wants to ensure that the money doesn't go into the pockets of anybody. So it sets down very clear guidelines as to how the fund should be spent. And they also give money for women's development, for under 15 youth development, grassroots development. And so FIFA has been doing that. But in my time, there was no FIFA money coming to JFF. In JFF, during the early days of Tony James and those guys who were running the football at that time, and Herondale, the JFF had to find and fund its own operations. Nowadays, the local federations are getting like $1 million and more. What would I do with that when we had to be banging on the doors, walking the pavements for sponsors? In Kasafa, which I ran for 11 years, all the partnership with the private sector was unbelievable. They wanted to do something. We got not a cent from government or from anybody to assist our programs. The federation is in an enviable position that it starts out knowing that there is something coming to the budget there. The STF also gives the JFF money, primarily for the administrative costs. But if they were doing something to help themselves, they'd be in a far better position than they are. And I can't paint a picture grimmer than what I see. And having been there and experienced it, I just have to let people know exactly what it is. And I don't know necessarily that the salvation is in the statutes, but the statutes will give a very clear roadmap as to who can vote, how many votes you have, and then we take the question of governance in there and understand that there are governance provisions here, particularly in relation to the question of finances. But there's also technical development. Who is a coach? Who is a football academy? What role should coaches play? What's the question of abuse of youngsters and all that? So, you know, we have a lot of things about the game. It's no different from government, really. It's just that it's related to one particular sport.
Well, I'm sure you know that a lot of people have been saying that had you won, you know, things would be a lot different. And I'm probably hoping that you will run again. No, I don't expect you to make an announcement tonight, but
VP Stewart, that is 5 years ago, and you know that one thing with us, each year you add another digit to your
Yes, that's true. It adds up.
Anyway, there's a hand up.
Yes, there are two questions in the chat.
Yes, go ahead.
There are two questions in the chat, Ambassador, for you. One of them is from the first one is from Joshua Dyer. Are there any plans for stewarding schoolboy talent for feeding our national program? And the second question is from
repeat that question. I didn't hear the question. Are there any plans?
Are there any plans for stewarding schoolboy talent for feeding our national program?
Okay. You want me to answer that one first?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if there are any plans, but typically, schoolboy football is managed by a separate independent body called ISA. ISA is that schoolboy of principals. It's a body run by principals, and they deal with schoolboy football. And before, in our history, most of the players getting into the national teams came straight out of the schoolboy system. Those of us who understand that the game is really developed by clubs, however, and that the schoolboy competition is really for 3 months of the year, whereas our football associations, we are the custodians of the game for 12 months. Know that the development of local talent comes through the clubs, and so there is a need to nurture and strengthen your clubs in every parish so that they can gather the talent and bring it forward together with the schoolboys. Now, the schoolboys, when they leave Manning Cup, all are supposed to enter the clubs so that the clubs can take them into the national grid. And so you will find in the early days with the Neville Oxfords and the John Harrises, they were walking straight from KC into the national teams, the Francis Delgados, all of those guys. Those were going straight into the national teams. But now these schoolboys are going or would have started in their clubs, played for their schools, and then move into the national grid. So ISA, I know in the previous constitution, and I understand now, will be restored, will have votes towards electing the office of the federation, because ISA is an organizer of football at the schoolboy level, both female and male as well. And so ISA will have a vote, as well as I said, the women's football, the coaches, as well as I understand it. But you know, that is timely and would be timely.
Here's the
Next
hand up,
one, here's
Mr.
a second
President.
one.
Here's the hand up.
Yes, Galaxy.
Actually, that hand is me, DP Marcel. A quick one, DP,
yes, Marcel.
Ambassador.
Yes.
I know there is a reluctance or fear when there is quote unquote governmental or political interference. But my question is, given that we have a ministry and a minister of sports,
Yes.
So my question is, and I'm just throwing it out, given what is obvious, somebody used the term cognate, given what is obvious and the importance of football, as we all know, and we're talking about a national organization that sends teams representing the country, you know,
yes.
I fear to see how, if you have a situation like this, there's some way, maybe even behind closed doors, for having a ministry of sports, that there can be or should be, my question is, some way of them getting involved, not to direct things, but to, you know, mediate, come on, and you know, even refer to the requirements of public disclosure and adopting sound principles and so forth, and, you know, reading the Riot Act. I mean, how could that be done? Could that delegation go there or something?
Well, first of all, you are right for caution, because government cannot get involved in the administration of football anywhere. FIFA will ban you, and have banned people once the government steps in. And once, especially in those countries which are dictatorships or totalitarian, there's a temptation for the government to try and run it.
I understand.
No, I'm just making the point though. Let me go down. But in Jamaica, the SDF gives the federation significant contribution and has done so over the years. So that is an interest. And I'm sure when the check is being passed, a kind word or a few words could be said, because you're passing a check, right? So I know that the current minister, who is highly respected, would have spoken in the hallways of power within the JFF. And even did you see that discussion in relation to the female coach? You heard that the minister did say a few words, but they have to be careful lest they fall into the trap. There are other people who I know who have announced their candidacy, not publicly, who may have governmental influence as well. And you may see those people coming up when the election comes. You know, whether they'll be successful or not is another thing. But I think that I can imagine the hair pulling going on with the minister and maybe even the PM when they see the state of Jamaica's football, which is so influential, you know. But as I say, and as you suggested, maybe behind closed doors it's happening, but I couldn't, you know, speak to that. But just to say, it would be, you know, has to be done very carefully.
Okay. All right. There's one more question, Ambassador, before we move on to the vote of thanks.
Yes.
The question is from DMV. What is the current JFF administration doing to harness and develop the youth talents what would your plans be if you were JFF president?
Well, I had done a manifest and I know exactly what I'd be doing. But right now, there is what they call a grassroots program that the JFF, I know, runs competitions with the parishes. Again, they haven't been done recently because there's no money. But typically, the JFF runs an under 13, 15, 17, under 20 program to match what we started in Kasafa. It's the only way to develop the game from the bottom up by capturing the players. So they have these grassroots programs where little kids 6 and 8 and 10 run around. And so before you put them in a structured thing, because President Paul and your members, the game of football is something that youngsters would want to enjoy and love and have fun with it. But you don't start structuring them until about 12 when you put them into competition structure, because you have to be careful that you don't burn out these youngsters or turn them off by too much stress and pressure on them. So at the grassroots level, I see it being done in cricket, little kiddie cricket, you have them playing with rubber balls and all that. I know the JFF has a program for that, but again, it could be much more forceful, much more successful if they had fun, because you have to pay the coaches. You have to pay for the facilities, you have to pay for the refreshments, and without funds, it's not going anywhere. So right now, it's the whole program is anemic because it's short of resources.
Yes, thank you very much, Ambassador.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yes. To do the official vote of thanks, I'm going to call on DP Chris Robinson to do so. DP Chris.
Thank you, President Paul. Fellow Kiwanians, friends, visitors, good evening. You know, before I move into the vote of thanks, I have to say that when I was asked to do this vote of thanks, the DP Stewart says, oh, you know, your schoolmate will be speaking, so you should, you know, I'm sure you'll want to give a vote of thanks. You know, I looked at the poster again. I saw who was the guest speaker, and I'm saying, no, I don't know. I don't know him to be a schoolmate. I do know that he has some association with Ulmas by virtue of his son. If he was a Wolmerian, you know, we will gladly have accepted him, because Ambassador Stephenson is of the quality which would make you know, any Woodmerian happy. So
thank you.
Having said that, but having said that, you know, Ambassador Stephenson being a lawyer and listening to him tonight, you know, I couldn't help but thinking that if this was a court of law and he was making his final arguments, you know, he would have been making some very strong arguments, you know, in terms of where the JFF now finds itself. You know, I heard a very compelling argument, you know, regarding the general incompetency of the incumbent general secretary. He made a very compelling argument saying that the president, by virtue of association with the general secretary, also, you know, should be under scrutiny. He told us that you cannot have any progress without a strategic plan. And this current administration came to office without a strategic plan. They did not have a financing plan, I mean, which is almost shocking. I mean, how can you hope to run a program without knowing how you're gonna finance such a program? And of course, a very compelling argument about the inadequacy of their financial accountability. Not to mention the weaknesses he highlighted in the governance structure of the JFF. You know, and the fact that their constitution really needs to be overhauled. He made a few other points. I won't repeat them all, but just to say that it was a very compelling argument here tonight. Those of us who may have had our doubts in terms of where the Jamaican football situation is and the way forward. I think what Ambassador was making, the point he was making is that this current administration is not able to move Jamaican football forward. A very strong, a very compelling argument. And I know that those of us who were listening would have arrived at the conclusion and agreed with the general point. So, Ambassador Stephenson,
yes.
allow me on behalf of President Paul and the members of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston to thank you for being here tonight and for what you have shared with us. We know that we are more informed about the total situation where football is concerned. And certainly for many of us, when we come to think about it, and if we are able to influence in any way, at least we know we have some information on which we can act, on which we should act. So we have a certificate for you, which is being displayed, and we will arrange for you to have to get that certificate
so that have it delivered so we can hang it on my wall.
That is correct. That is perfectly correct. Yes. So again, thank you very much for being here tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, DP Chris, and thanks again to Ambassador Stephenson for that presentation. We move on to our Sergeant at Arms, and I'm going to call on Kiwani and Zuri Johnson to extract some fines from our members. Kiwani and Zuri.
Thank you, President Paul, and good evening to everyone on the platform. So I don't really have a joke this evening. I just have two questions. First, asking why did the chicken cross the road? And the answer to get to the other side, and just to find out if anybody knows Bruce Lee's older brother, who is much quicker than him, who goes by the name Suddenly. And in celebration of today being the start of summer, I have good news. We are going to have no charges this evening.
General Sergeant.
This sergeant must get the voted, man.
Might not be so lucky with this president, though.
You have to demote the sergeant.
Right. Yes.
No, you have to demote him.
Have to demote him.
Yeah, man.
No, let him fund it. Let the sergeant fund it this evening down.
You sure you wanted that?
Yes.
You sure you wanted that?
The sergeant doesn't have to give a joke. He can just give a story.
Remember, the break ends next week. So be careful.
Bring a story next week rather than a joke. You don't have to give a joke.
Yeah. All right. So you didn't enjoy my question?
No, waiting for the answer for the question. You haven't given us the answer.
I did. You just weren't listening.
Oh.
To get to the one. Run it again.
Run it again, Sarge.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
To get to the other side.
Exactly, I said that.
No, okay. It's the second one. It's the second one we didn't hear. It's the second one we didn't hear.
Oh,
we didn't hear the second one at all.
Yeah,
Bruce Lee's older brother is Suddenly.
Suddenly. All right.
The chicken.
You won, Sarge, yes.
That's a Japanese.
We'll move on to our notices and announcements. But before I do so, may I ask for an extension of 5 minutes so they can wrap up our program, our agenda?
Aye.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and seconded. Thank you very much. We'll move on to notices and announcements, and I'm going to call on Secretary Dale G. William to do so.
Thank you, President Paul.
Just to remind the club of our upcoming Barbie Fry on Friday at 11 Fairway Avenue. Pick up between 11 and 2:30. There will be a bar for those who want to refresh themselves on site. Just to give you an update, the sales of tickets have been going very, very well. And we are currently, and we have just closed at 841. Congratulations to those who have assisted to reach that target. On Friday, June 24th, in the evening, there's an organizational meeting at the Kiwanis Club of Nation Builders Kingston. That is the new club in formation, which is being sponsored by Kiwanis Club of Kingston. Tomorrow, we have the finals of the oracle competition at DuPont, and that is 3 o'clock. This is the brainchild of DP Chris Robinson. We want to thank Liner Metro for their sponsorship. Then on Sunday, 26th, delegates, please remember, and we need some strong support from our members. Third quarter divisional council meeting is going to be a virtual meeting. I will send out the link once I get it from the division. And just a reminder of the upcoming convention, the one day, Kiwanis one day, on Sunday, July 31st. That's at 8 a.m. We have ordered shirts for those who wanted shirts, and they'll be available sometime next week or the following week at the latest. In terms of the clubbing opportunities, very interesting one tomorrow evening. Kiwanis Club of Kingston, 6 p.m. They have their annual spelling bee competition. Tomorrow night is the final. That should be interesting.
What club is that? We didn't hear that, DSG. What club is that?
New Kingston. Club of New Kingston.
Okay, thank you.
President Paul, are those that announcements and inter-clubbing opportunity for tonight?
Yes. Thank you very much, Deirdre. William. We'll move on to the thought for the week, and I'm going to call on DP Stewart to do so. DP Stewart?
Yes, President Paul. But I think I owe a little explanation for what Chris had to say, because I do know that the ambassador went to KC, but somehow I got mixed up with the fact that he and Marcel had a good relationship. So somehow I thought, it kind of confused me for a minute. That's why I said the Woolman's connection. But so that's where that went wrong. But I do know he went to KC. Anyway, moving on. I have two thoughts for you. Yeah, I have two thoughts. The first one is, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And my second thought is, don't let the things you don't have cause you not to appreciate all of the blessings you do have. And those are my two thoughts, President Paul.
Thank you very much, DP Stewart. Well, it was a good meeting, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time out and to be here this evening with us, especially the delegation from the Kiwanis Club of Ligani in support of our guest speaker, Ambassador Stewart Stephenson. So I'm going to ask that we all raise a toast to Kiwanis International and to Jamaica Land We Love. This meeting of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston is now terminated at 8:39 p.m. Thank you.
Here.
Yeah, right. It was really a good presentation, Stuart. Really a good presentation.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Yes, Ambassador. Very good presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yes.
The namesake wanted to run.
VP Bobby, good to see you. DLG
Good to see
Bobby. Yeah,
That's
man.
Bobby's first comment.
Yes.
Ambassador
and Ralston.
Thanks for kicking off the campaign right here, you see.
Ambassador.
And I take up as campaign manager, sir.
President designate Pat, I don't know. This job is great, but 10 times as difficult as it would have been.
I know. Come on, you're up to the challenge.
Recovery.
And the heart might be willing, but the flesh certainly is going to be weak at my stage of life.
Don't worry. You have enough strength to carry. There will be others to
You
keep
must
up.
come with your face eat something.
I can't help it. I jealous man that, from Calabar.
Trevor, good to see you.
Even Trevor come alive.
All right, I'm still at. Have to bid you guys farewell. All right? Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yes, my friend.
Okay, Stu.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
VP Stewart.
Yes.
Not Stephen.
Okay.
Spencer.
Yeah.
There's a guest from the Kiwanis Club. Leo.
Endorsing Stewart.
You mean the ambassador?
It's so bad. Yeah.
But from the change the thing down to the 13 people, that was disaster in the making.
Yes.
Precisely.
It's like
Quite easy now.
You just set it. Easy to set. Easy to just set.
Exactly. Don't do it.
That was a wrong thing from the
Anyway.
By the morning.
You have to be correct with the